Additive.
Thank you. Is this the only type of inverse of 3?
No, it's multiple.
Multiplicative inverse.
Inverse, yeah.
There are other inverses as well. The inverse of a square is a square root. Square is a square root, right? We'll get to things called logarithms later. The inverse of that is an exponential. And so we have to know the different types of inverses. So I can't just say the inverse of 3 is negative 3. If you haven't had that detail yet, you need to add in the word additive. You can rewrite it. You can just use the arrow there to add in the word additive. So the additive inverse of 3 is negative 3. Does anyone have anything else they want to add for another word that might describe additive inverse?
Subtraction.
It always gives you 0.
Okay, so we're going to talk about that 0 in a second. But there is a word that I've seen multiple people write down, another word that is the same as the additive inverse.
Addition.
What does it start with? Starts with an O.
Opposite.
Okay. And now I need you to hear me very clearly. If you wrote the word opposite down for both an additive inverse and a multiplicative inverse, that is not correct. We need to learn from this, okay? The word opposite only means additive inverse in mathematics.
So if I have opposite, I can just replace it with additive.
Say that one more time.
If I have the word opposite, I can just put additive in its place.
So you can say additive inverse instead of opposite. And I hope that's how you spell opposite, because that's one of those, I never remember if it's 2 P's and 1 S or whatever. I think that's right, though.
That's right.
That's right. Okay, cool. Thank you. I teach math for a reason. More importantly, Microsoft Word is my best friend at times. I know lots of words. Spelling them is not my strength. The additive inverse, right? The opposite. The opposite only means additive inverse of 3 is negative 3. Now, in your own words, what does this mean, right? And so I already heard a really important idea, right? Why is this important? Because
it helps solve equations.
Okay, it does help solve equations, but why? Why is it important that the opposite of 3 is negative 3? There's another number that I heard multiple people already saying. It creates a 0.
Oh.
Because it's an additive inverse. So if I add those two numbers, right? What is 3 plus negative 3?
0.
0. Right? Similarly, what is the additive inverse of negative 5? 5. And what is negative 5 plus 5?
0.
So
It
that
no
might
matter what
be...
way you do it, it's going to always give you 0.
Right. If you have the additive inverse, it's always going to give you a 0. And that 0 is important. That 0 is known as the additive identity. Because when you add two inverses, what are you going to get?
0.
0. And if you get that 0, is that going to help you get closer to your variable?
Yes.
Yes. Right? When we start solving equations, that 0 is going to help you get closer to your variable.
Because you know that it's useless now? Is that why?
Say that one more time.
Is it because it's useless after you figure out that it's 0?
Well, okay, so that's a good question.
Like
We'll talk about this a little bit more when we get down to the later questions.
Okay.
Hold on to that question though. Creating zeros gets us closer to isolating the variable.
Creating zeros.
Right? So creating those zeros gets us closer to isolating that variable, and that's going to be important when it comes to solving equations in the future, right? We got to have those additive inverses.
If our like if what we wrote looks nothing close to that, and we just kind of like sprout off to the side.
It's fine. It's your notes.
Because I just added what you put on
And then that's fine as well. So I need y'all to hear me on this, and this is important. I'm going to listen in on our conversations. There are certain things that I'll have planned to already talk about because they're important, but I'm going to listen in on your conversations to know if I can cut some things out or if I need to add more. But it's by you talking through these things that, one, you're going to get a better understanding, and two, when I start talking about it as well, you'll see where you might have misconceptions. Because again, if you don't fully understand what the word opposite means, it will mess you up in later mathematics. And so I need to hear your conversations, and then you can modify them to correct your misunderstandings. It's great to identify the misunderstandings so you can improve how well you understand it. All right, so moving on, multiplicative inverse.
Can I answer this one?
You really confident in your answer?
I think I'm.
All right, so
Don't blast me now. I'm just
Okay, hold on. First off, can I start like that?
No,
Why?
you gotta put multiple,
Multiplicative.
whatever they say.
I know. Remember, the more you say these words, the better you'll get at saying them. But it's okay to stumble over it. So the multiplicative inverse of 7 is
-7.
-7. All right, anyone else? Any other ideas?
I was gonna say 49.
Okay. Does anybody want to push back on that idea that the multiplicative inverse of 7 is -7?
It would
Divided by
be
7.
Divided by 7.
It'd be dividing by 7?
No. Oh, yeah.
The inverse of multiplication and division.
Oh, the inverse of multiplication is division, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's 1. Oh, and oh yeah. So the multiple inverse
I always create.
always create 1.
We're gonna get into that in a second. But the multiplicative inverse of 7, now I want to point this out. We should know instantly that multiplicative inverse of 7 is not -7, because -7 is which inverse? Additive inverse, right? Remember, 7 and -7 would create that 0. Okay, but, and I hear the idea of division by 7, but I saw at least one student had a slightly better way to write it. Gerald, right? What'd you put?
I put one divided by 7 because the opposite of multiplication is division, so it creates a different scenario.
1 divided by 7 or 1/7, okay? So a multiplicative or an additive inverse is a single number. Y'all are correct that division is the inverse of multiplication, but the multiplicative inverse of 7 is 1/7 because
It give you
7 times 1 divided by 7
Equals 1.
equals
1.
1. So instead of just saying divided by 7, this is showing, that fraction is showing 1 divided by 7. Now, a small detail I'm going to add in here to remind you is, if it's the whole number 7, it's understood to be divided by what?
1.
Okay? Does anyone know another term for these multiplicative
Cross
inverses?
multiplication.
No.
Say it again. Reciprocal. The multiplicative inverse is also called a reciprocal. Notice it is not the opposite. The reciprocal is the multiplicative inverse.
Oh, that's what I was talking about earlier.
So what's a reciprocal?
Okay? That's a great question. So 1/3. Does anyone know what the reciprocal of 1/3 would be? It's 3 divided by 1. Anybody know what the reciprocal of 2/5 would be?
5 to 6. To the 6.
Not 5 to the second, 5
Oh,
halves, or not over. What does this fraction bar mean? Divided by 2.
Oh.
So I want you to notice, because what is 1/3 times 3 divided by 1? 1. What is 2/5 times 5 halves? You might just assume it's 1, but notice, what is 2 times 5?
10.
Okay, what's 5 times 2?
10.
So that's 10 divided by 10, or
1.
1, right?
I did not know that. I knew what that was. I just didn't know the word.
The words for it.
Yeah.
But I want you to notice the words matter, because now it's going to be easier to talk about, right?
See, help me out, though. Like, I know reciprocals when I see it, but I actually don't know what it actually means. I don't know how to explain it.
The reciprocal is the most technical way to say it, which I wouldn't write this down. Most technical way to say it is the reciprocal is the multiplicative inverse, so the product creates a 1. Multiplicative inverses, their product creates a 1. But look again at the fractions. Like, what's a more comfortable way to talk about these fractions? The fractions what?
Flip.
The numerators and denominators switch places. Right? Isn't that an easier way to say it?
Yeah.
Where the numerator and denominator flip?
Yeah.
Okay. That's the easiest way to say it. The technical definition of a reciprocal is two numbers whose product is 1. Well, that's kind of hard to figure that out sometimes, but hey, the numerators and denominators switch. We good with that idea?
Yes, sir.
Cool. All right. By the way, does anyone know what we would call this 1 right here then?
The multiplicative
I did.
The multiplicative identity. And I guess I should have pointed this out earlier. The reason why these are important is if I have 7 plus 0, what is that? 7. If I have x squared plus 0, what is that? X squared. Notice when I add 0, does it change the identity of the other thing? No. When I do 1 times 7, what do I get? 7. When I do 1 times x squared, what do I get? 1. So the multiplicative identity means that when I multiply it, it doesn't change the identity. Okay? The identities are important because they won't change the identity of the other expression. And so it's important to note the difference between the additive and multiplicative identities. The identity of the other number or other expression won't change, right? So the identities, right, when you add by it or multiply by it, it will not change the identity of the other number or expression.
Connecting to skills.
We'll get to that in a second. Really quick question, and this is just a quick show of hands. Who feels like they understand mathematical terms a little bit better today?
I do.
Good. That means we're growing and learning. Who realized that they misunderstood some of these terms before today? Sorry, let me reword that. Before today, who realized that they misunderstood what these terms meant? We already knew that we didn't understand these terms fully?
Well, I did a little bit. I knew a little bit.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's been I ain't had no math, like.
I know. But I just want to point this out, like, a lot of times we don't even realize, or at least what I've seen is we don't realize that we don't know what a term means. And so we need to be careful in figuring out what that term means so that we can use it more accurately in the future, right? So I want you to be clear and consistent with your language. Let's just stop there. I'm going to send out a bell ringer, not a bell ringer, an exit slip. Let me actually, oh, y'all don't have the calculators. I can't send out the exit slip, never mind, okay. We're going to continue then, just for a minute, my bad. Yeah, work on number 3 within your small groups for just a minute, and we'll wrap up with a
Okay, guys.
couple conversations.
Let's get going.
Explain what to do to solve this
Okay, that
equation.
sounds good.
So like you
Yeah,
want to do
Show me the steps, maybe explain it, connect it to numbers 1 and 2. Quick question just for y'all. How would you rate your active collaboration, thinking about whole class discussion, things like that? Huh? That 1 to, remember 0 through 5. You think 5?
Okay.
What you get?
5?
Show your understanding of explaining
Yeah?
what to do.
Oh,
Okay,
what do you think?
that's a good question. So,
I'm sorry.
What would I rate?
Caitlin, I had you at a 4.
Yeah, I really.
Kennedy, there we go, 4, Trinavia, and Kyle,
That's wrong.
I had you at a 4 as well. And I think the
I
big
didn't put the
difference
answer down.
is for me,
Dude,
I didn't feel like
subtract
it was
not add.
consistently throughout the entire class. I would say at least 75% of the time we were talking within your small groups. But I didn't see all 3 of questioning, sharing thoughts, and
Wait, there's more.
taking notes, especially early on. Okay, well, we gotta fix that, right? So those are just things to be aware of moving
That
forward.
were multiple.
Okay, is that fair though?
To divide by 7 to take away the 7 and get it along.
So quick question for y'all, how would y'all rate your active collaboration today? Be honest with
So
yourself,
you
that's
said,
0 to 5,
so
huh?
starting by, okay, you would
2?
start by
3?
taking
3?
the.
Only a 1? So remember, 1 basically says that you're like not doing anything. What I would say is, I feel like you all have been actively working the whole time, but not necessarily doing the best to engage and discuss. I think, Brittany, I do have you at 3. I'm thinking forward, listening to you in the second half of class, but Ishmael, I would definitely say like you're in the 3 just because you're not talking. You're working the whole time, right? So you're engaged, or you're developing, but you need to engage with your peers to also do similar things, similar things. Right? Y'all are working.
Yep.
You're gonna learn more when you discuss it and collaborate with your peers, okay? Keep tagging on. It's a good question. How would y'all rate your active collaboration in class today?
I thought like a 4.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe just
By use.
4.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kyle is saying,
Additive inverse.
what do you think?
First, I use.
Say again? A 4? Okay.
And then you doing.
No, but not as a group, I just said I have.
No, yeah.
Yes, you are.
One more people.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say as well, and I think Soraya and Kelsey, I would say that y'all have been talking within your group well at a level of 4 from what I've seen. But because we haven't been talking and sharing ideas and questions during the whole class discussion, you couldn't earn a 4, it was down to a 3. Does that make sense? So there's something, a little bit of feedback to improve there. I will say, I think Kylie, no, that's wrong, Kylie. I have you at a 4, but Savannah, I felt like you were talking well during the whole class discussion and things, and showing a little bit of leadership, getting everyone talking in this group, so I had you at a 5. Right, so those are the things I'm looking for.
To
Okay.
get what? Y'all were saying to get what? Because I put number 8 was divide by 70.
Can't complain too much.
Okay, so the first
Final answer.
Yes, ma'am.
To get X by itself too. Well, yeah, to get X by itself and to get the final answer. That makes sense?
So what are you creating when you're dividing by 7? Right. So you're talking about creating, using the additive inverse to create the additive identity, right? Remember, looking at that, so y'all don't divide by 7. Sydney, is that reciprocal that we talked
I
about?
got the H, J-A-I-K-Y-L.
Real name hard.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so don't start to pack up yet because I want to cover a couple of details when it comes to the closing. First off, we're not doing that exit slip because you don't have calculators. That was silly of me. The math literacy assignment, when is that due?
Due Friday.
That is due Friday, okay? I didn't originally have this plan, so I'm adding it in. When is your Blue Desmos homework?
Next
Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, the 18th. Please notice the fundamentals graphic organizer. We haven't gotten through all these words yet, but all words through linear functions are going to be due Friday as well. So I would start on that ASAP because the longer you wait for that, the harder it'll be. Yes, ma'am. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly, why
Okay,
you said I
I'll
had
put
a
the
0
videos
bit?
and put the resources up early. Yes, Jenny. Math lesson, perfect. Okay, tomorrow we're going to continue these foundations of Algebra 1. Please log out of your laptops before you leave, pack up, and you can leave the laptops where they are. Make sure you take your name cards with you, and you plan to get them out as soon as class starts in the future. See, I can do it too, Kyle.